This is Branko Malic of Tribune with an introductory podcast to the series about Aristotle's metaphysics. To be more precise, the series about the fourth Gamma book of Aristotle's metaphysics. It is for those who know the Greek alphabet, not to be perplexed. The Gamma is the third letter of Greek alphabet, but Aristotle's metaphysics has two chapters named Alpha. Alpha, the first chapter, and Alpha Elaton, that means small alpha, that's the second chapter of metaphysics. And mind you, one of the good ones to get yourself introduced into his way of thinking, because metaphysics is a very difficult book, one of the most difficult in the history of philosophy. And this Alpha Elaton, second book of metaphysics, is mercifully accessible to laymen, that is the people who don't devote a substantial amount of time in studying Greek philosophy. So Gamma book of metaphysics is fourth book. Now I lost advantage of dramatic introduction to those who don't know that metaphysics is in fact the name of the book. So I'll get right into it, why it is called metaphysics. Namely, we use the word metaphysics for a lot of things. And most of the people who never studied philosophy or never bothered to look into who Aristotle was, and don't know the origin of this word, what it means in Greek, and where it comes from. And it has a very definite origin. But first of all, the usual notion of metaphysics, the usual notion people have of metaphysics, that it's something that lies beyond the level of everyday experience. To give you an illustration what I mean, I'll tell you when I first started to think about what the metaphysics is. I was 15 years old, and I read about Ramones, the band. There was a series of articles in one, I don't know how you call it in English, but music magazine, pop rock punk magazine in ex-Yugoslavia in the 1990. I vividly remember there was a series of articles on Ramones, as we small town kids from then still Yugoslavia and Balkans had not really a good access or easy access to information about our favorite bands. We used to read those articles day after day, again and again and again and again. And there was one sentence about earlier Ramones when they practiced in the basement in in Queens, I think in Joy Ramon's basement or his mama's basement. And then the journalist said that was the beginning. That was a beginning of the Ramones, months and months of basement metaphysics. And now I heard those words before because living in let's call it semi-communist country, one pretty old communist country, you kind of get in touch with these terms, because communism is albeit completely false and wrong idea, in fact philosophically founded, and it is to an extent always philosophy. So in communism you have pretty communists are pretty serious about ideas and about philosophy. So you could they were not so oriented on natural sciences and which is somewhat paradoxical, and experimental sciences, but more on dialectics as they saw it, and philosophy. So the words like metaphysics or dialectics, you kind of picked up on them as a kid, although you never knew what they mean. And when I first saw this in this article, I kind of had to put a question what metaphysics is. And I came to conclusions that it's some kind of stepping over one's own boundaries, going, pushing things further of way of where are you right now. What I could now say transcending yourself. I was too young then, of course. I didn't know what transcendent mean. And this is my experience. I believe for some people, a good number of people, the experience of or notion of metaphysics comes from uh, some kind of uh, some kind of other of new age. Not that I mean that people who have this usual notion of metaphysics as something that transcends everyday experience or personal experience. I'm not saying that they are New Age practicants, but New Age is kind of like popular philosophy of postmodern world, positive thinking, such things. If you are prone to having something with what we now call philosophy, nowadays philosophy, someone having his own philosophy nowadays means that he has some kind of worldview. This is not philosophy. You can't have your own philosophy. There is a philosophy. You can learn it. You can participate on it. You can't make it up. This personal philosophy is in fact a worldview. That's a completely different thing. And this new age meaning, albeit very extremely flawed and false, is not entirely so. Namely, to say that metaphysics or metaphysical is something that transcends the boundary is pretty accurate, in fact. And now, when we have broadly outlined this usual notions of a term, we can proceed to define it precisely. And this is, mind you, I am imitating Aristotle's own approach in philosophy. Namely, Aristotle always considered the opinions of the many, as he called them. What we now call prejudice, excuse me, uh, preconceived notion, prejudice of people, some something some people call even superstitions. In Aristotle's mind, those common notions always disclose the truth in some way. They never disclosed it, of course, in detail, but they were always founded on truth. And he was very, very serious about them. And he always not always, but most of his inquiries started with these common notions. Let's see what people say. Let's see what people think, especially when it comes to ethics and politics, but also in physics and metaphysics. Namely, the metaphysics comes from the Greek expression ta meta ta physika. This ta is an article for Greek plural. That means ta means therefore article indicates the known some kind of participle of verb to be, which Greek can turn into known. Something is very problematic in English. ta fysika therefore means the things or the beings. That's ta. Meta, that means after. Ta fysika means the uh, things considered by the science on nature. So metaphysica means the beings that come after the beings observed by science of nature. Now this is very convoluted translation, but it is such because it is pretty accurate. We would not just to give you a feel of how Aristotle speaks. Namely, I am not so well versed in Greek, in ancient Greek, but I do know some basis of this language. And in Aristotle, it is very important to know some Greek. At least you know syntactic structure and some words, because Aristotle's Greek is very sparse and stylistically very dry, so it's relatively easy to translate him in a sense that you can you can pretty much devise for yourself Aristotle Greek vocabulary, because he doesn't use many words, but the meanings of those words is very misleading to modern or contemporary postmodern man. So metaphysics is something. It's what we see from this title. It is a kind of method. It's kind of methodical thought or science about some things that come after nature. And this is the word Aristotle never uses. Nowhere in the 14 books of metaphysics, or 14 chapters, you will find the word metaphysics. This word was used by people who tried to his successor in his peripatetic school, or better to say peripatetic tradition, tried to place this 14 treatises into unified whole, and uh, one of them was called Andronicus of Rhodes. He was a thinker from 1st century BC, and he is credited to have edited the first reliable edition of Aristotle, that is systematization of his books. But there arose the problem. Namely, for ages, this notion of metaphysics as the science of the beings which are on the other side of nature, after the nature. This is please remember, this is important, because nowadays we usually understand this meta as in meta language to means kind of meaning something before. It's not before, it's after. Meta means as metastasis in cancer, where metastasa, when it spreads. But this is, as we shall see in the future podcasts, perfectly in line with Aristotle's view how we come to know these things or beings that are after the nature, other side of nature. They are before nature, but we come to know them in the temporal sequence only after the beings that we perceive by senses. But that will be the subject of other podcasts. Now, in uh, this bibliographical origin of the word metaphysics uh, um, gave rise to a controversy, and this controversy was first borne out uh, by Renaissance Platonic philosopher of Croatian origin, Franciscus Patricius, Franje Petrić. He was from Cres, an island in Adriatic Sea at that time, ruled by Venice, of course. And in his work Discussiones Peripateticae from 1571, he came out with an idea that metaphysics denotes the position of these 14 treatises on the shelf of Alexandrian libraries. So the idea is that the title, the things that come after the physics, means literally the writings which somebody put on the shelf next to the physics. And this idea was picked up in 1788 by Bühle, one philologist, historian of philosophy, who posited that Andronikov wrote was perplexed as to where to put these pragmateias, because pragmateia is the word for this, what we translate books. Books are like chapters in one book. And he put those pragmateias next to physics. So there is no metaphysics in. When today we use the word metaphysics, it has a completely mundane origin. It's simply some guy Andronicus couldn't find a proper name for a bunch of Aristotle works, and he said, "Well, I call them the things I put next to the physics." And this way of thinking about Aristotle, the name of Aristotle's work on metaphysics, kind of ruled the academic world for a long time, even to mid 20th century, when it's when problems innate to it started to emerge once again. This gives us some hint about how badly founded the history of ideas can be. When you hear this story about the origin of metaphysics, if it is said by some professor, and usually it is said by some kind of expert, you presuppose that it is founded on historical, on great amount of historical data which is known to these professors, researchers, and so on. Well, it is not. As most things in history of ideas, it is founded on breadcrumbs of information. It is, first of all, the very idea that this guy Andronicus was important peripatetic philosopher who edited the Aristotle's work and named treatises we call metaphysics. Metaphysics comes from the important Platonic philosopher Porphyry, who was the student and biographer of Plotinus, the greatest Neoplatonic philosopher of late antiquity. And Porphyrius told us that, I quote, Andronicus divided the works of Aristotle and Theophrastus into treatises. Theophrastus was Aristotle's successor, collecting related material into the same place. End quote. This is where it comes from. One sentence. And when we look at the Stanford Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy online, which I don't like one bit, but there is some use of in checking it out once in a while. This is what we this is what we learn about Andronic. I quote: Andronicus of Rhodes is credited with the production of the first reliable edition of Aristotle. Nothing certain is known about his life and work. End quote. So this is the evidence on so-called bibliographical origin of the word metaphysics. As you see, it is based on practically one sentence. And it tells a whole lot about how people who think about the ancient world, medieval world, and past in general are easily misled to take some supposedly scientific insights as valid. Those insights are more often than not completely based on imagination based on one or two sentences. But be that as it may, the name Aristotle used for the subject of metaphysics or the method of metaphysics is protophilosophia, the first philosophy, Sophia, wisdom, or theologia, theology. Those are three words he uses for the episteme zetumene, the science sought for, because the whole of the metaphysics is devoted to a search for a science. The 14 books of metaphysics do not expound anything resembling system of sciences. They are inquiry into the nature and the object or the purpose of the methodical thinking we nowadays call metaphysics and which we call protophilosophia. And this is very important because he is not throughout the book. You can't really pinpoint with utmost certainty what the metaphysics is, because it is highly questionable. Does Aristotle really succeeds in defining it, or is it really something you can define? Is it something that transcends definition? And this book, be that as it may, was, I can't emphasize this enough, extremely influential. It is a civilization building book, and as such it is not solely because it is work of one genius individual, what Aristotle was. It is the expression and the nucleus of civilization. Aristotle, as all great Greek philosopher, never claimed originality in the modern sense, because originality in modern sense means some kind of being ingenious procreator of something new. Aristotle didn't consider himself such in any way, shape or form. He considered himself just to be expounding what is already present. This may seem self-evident, but it is not. He didn't claim creation or invention. He only claimed perhaps discovery. And this discovery, as he explicitly puts it in one one place at the beginning of metaphysics, is something that people periodically discover and then forget and then discover it again. And one of those things is metaphysics, in this context theology. Something that people discovered long ago, forgot about it, and then discovered it again. This is, of course, related to Greek concept of cyclical time, but for our purposes, I think it still merits a value, because this is the way of thinking that is posited, that is founded on reality, on depicting of reality, and not on inventing anything. This is extremely important, because nowadays, especially in philosophy, of what is left of it, uh, we deal with inventing of ideas, of inventing a new conceptual systems or something like that. There is no no way you can apply this to Aristotle or Plato, for that matter, because in my opinion it is impossible to approach Aristotle without Plato. They go together always. If you devise these two ways in which Greek philosophy developed, you'll get nowhere. And as I said at the outset, the we will be very specific in this series of podcasts. We'll analyze the book Gamma of Aristotle Metaphysics, which is um, devoted to one specific problem, and to give some outline in advance, and to once more stress how unreliable modern information about these problems are. We'll make one quotation from this fountain of information, the Wikipedia, and point out why Wikipedia is by no means a good source. This is what Wikipedia has to say about the subject of metaphysics. I quote, "Metaphysics is one of the principal works of Aristotle, and the first major work of the branch of philosophy with the same name." Okay, we'll stop right here. It is one of principal works of Aristotle, but it is by no means the first major work of the branch of philosophy with the same name. It is not. The first major work of metaphysics is the first fragment of Thales from Milet, the first philosopher we know of that is preserved in tradition. Namely, whole Greek philosophy of the classical age, classical Greek philosophy, with the exception of cynics and skeptics, is a metaphysics, because the philosophy is born with the question of what is origin, tst arche. It is the question of arche, of that which is first. And this is what we properly call metaphysical question. It is the question of origin and the question of cause. Origin and cause are not necessarily the same thing, and we will dwell into it in the posterior and subsequent podcasts. But just to point this out, other thing, it is not it is not the first zone, it is not the first metaphysical work. This complete nonsense. Second, it is not the branch of philosophy. It is, if we can talk about the branching of philosophy and sciences, we are talking about Aristotle, because he was the first to do this. That is to devise some kind of classification of philosophy, or what he called sciences, although those were not sciences in the modern sense of the word. And metaphysics is not a branch; it's a foundation. It's where they stem from. So this is also inaccurate. Now I quote further. The principal subject of metaphysics is being qua being, that is in Latin qua, being as being, or being is so far as it is being. This is not true. The being qua being is the principal subject of one segment of metaphysics, and precisely that we are going to devote our podcast is to. That is books Gamma and Epsilon of metaphysics, which are very similar. We'll concentrate on Gamma. The principal subject of metaphysics is manifold. It is not only this being as being or being qua being. This is the subject of what we would nowadays call ontology, and ontology and metaphysics are not the same thing. While you can in modern world still speak about ontology, they won't let you speak about metaphysics. They won't let you speak about it seriously, I mean. The broadest and the most let's say most encompassing definition of what the subject of metaphysics is that it is twofold. It is the inquiry about the first origin, and it is the inquiry of being as being. It is both. So it is science of one unique, absolutely unique, perfect origin, and one all-encompassing or underlying and ever-present substance. How those two things relate, or indeed how they can relate, is a grave problem. And this quote from Wikipedia is completely nonsensical. So when you approach, have to point this out, because when you approach Wikipedia and internet in general, you can get a pretty illusory knowledge, seemingly founded on truth. You have this notes, footnotes, and you think this is it, and you can have, after reading this article on Aristotle Metaphysics, that you know something about it. It's worse. No, you not only you don't know, you are misled with first two sentences. So our subject will be this being qua being, this special subject of first philosophy or wisdom, or as we would now call it, metaphysics. It is not the sole object of this epistemes etumene, or the science Aristotle is looking for, and it is very extremely mysterious, extremely difficult, and extremely important, in my opinion. Nowadays, in the times when philosophy practically is thrown out from academia and replaced with pseudo philosophy, especially in my opinion with the pseudo philosophy of so-called linguistic turn, all those problems, like this problem of being qua being we'll talk about so much, are considered illusory problems, non-problems. The problems that stem from us not understanding the logic of our language. That is that they are merely problems that come out from lack of reflection on the nature of language, and therefore that they are not real. This way of thinking is very similar to way of thinking that pronounce metaphysics to be merely the title of the book put next to the book on physics. The job of philosophy, as Wittgenstein, one of the prime philosophers of linguistic turn, once put out, was that it is the demystification of language, trying to show that all these mysterious problems we find are in fact something very mundane, something coming from our misuse of language, and that there is no, he likes to say this, there is no mystery. There is only the world as a plenum of sense data which has some kind of form that reflects in language, so it corresponds in some strange way to our system of language, and we can, natural sciences can describe it, and all other types of methodical inquiry are nonsensical, and we must ditch them because we are going to go mad from them. That's a little paraphrasing and paraphrasing of Wittgenstein, but I think I'm pretty much doing him justice. That's the way he thinks. And problem is that this way of thinking kind of detaches us from our past, because many words we use today have very, very interesting, very metaphysical meaning. One of those words is, for example, hierarchy or hierarchia. This word was conceived by Pseudo Dionysius Areopagita, that's Christian, anonymous Christian philosopher who used the name of Saint Paul's first convert in Athens, Dionysius the Areopagite, to expound his theology. In fact, he is the originator of the term mystical theology. But hierarchia, when we say the hierarchy of army, the hierarchy of church, hierarchy of this, hierarchy of that, that word meaning the source of holiness, or the source of outpouring the holiness, because the word source here in Dionysius has a kind of this pictorial meaning of source, like a brook, or like a source of light, something dynamic, outpouring of something, is completely this word has completely theological and metaphysical meaning. It is not word from everyday life, from army life, for instance. No, no, no. It is the word that was devised to define something that transcends the everyday experience, or the sense experience, better to say. Something that defines something metaphysical. And now we will stop for this first podcast. I think this was sufficient for introduction of what will follow in the next weeks, and we'll try to give a close reading of the text of this fourth book of Aristotle's Metaphysics, and with references, of course, to other his other writings, and to problems in general, because of course the philosophy is difficult and painstaking and tantalizing only insofar you don't perceive that problems these great philosophers talk about as something that is so present to us that it is the most intimate and the most important for every one of us, although we don't think about it. And they provide, especially these ancient philosophers, provide us with some insights which are more than beneficial, which are in fact essential for coming to grips with what the truth is and what the freedom is. And we'll see what Aristotle, the let's say the father of metaphysics as we know it today, has to say about it. This was Branko Malic for Kali Tribune. Hope you like this podcast and hope you will follow the subsequent ones. Thank you for your attention.